The autumn evening was growing darker as Michael Henderson stepped out of his gleaming office building in downtown Seattle. At 45, he had everything money could buy: a successful tech company, a magnificent house, and a reputation as one of the city's most influential businessmen. Yet, his eyes carried a sadness that even his wealth couldn't erase. As he walked toward his parked Tesla, a sound caught his attention. At first, he tried to ignore it, but the soft whimpers grew louder. Near the small grocery store across the street, a young woman sat on a wooden bench, cradling a small bundle in her arms. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Michael hesitated. Since losing his wife Sarah 2 years ago, he had become more withdrawn, focusing solely on his work and his teenage daughter Emily. But something about the woman's desperation pulled at him. Perhaps it was the way she held the baby, or maybe it was the defeated slump of her shoulders. "Are you all right?" he asked, approaching carefully to avoid startling her. The woman looked up, and Michael saw she couldn't be more than 25. Her clothes were clean but worn, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. The baby in her arms couldn't have been more than a few months old. "I'm sorry," she whispered, quickly wiping her tears. "I don't mean to bother anyone. We'll leave." As she started to stand, Michael noticed the empty formula container beside her and several crumpled receipts. His eyes fell on a declined credit card lying on the bench. "Wait," he said gently. "Are you having trouble buying something?" The woman's lip trembled as she looked down at her baby. "My card was declined. I tried everything, but I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't even buy formula for my baby. I've been giving her diluted milk, but I know it's not good for her. I don't know what to do anymore." Michael felt a familiar ache in his chest. He remembered Sarah's words from years ago. Sometimes, people just need someone to show them that hope still exists. Without hesitation, he reached for his wallet. "How much does the formula cost?" "Sir, please, I'm not begging," the woman said quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I just needed a moment to figure things out." "I know you're not begging," Michael replied kindly, "but every parent deserves help when they need it. Please, let me do this." He pulled out $500 in cash, far more than formula would cost, and held it out to her. "Take it. Get what your baby needs." The woman stared at the money, her eyes filling with fresh tears. I can't accept so much." "Yes, you can," Michael insisted. "Buy formula, diapers, whatever else you need. Things will get better." With trembling hands, she accepted the money. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means. I promise I'll find a way to repay you." Michael shook his head. "Just take care of your little one. That's repayment enough." As he watched the young mother hurry into the grocery store, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: a sense of purpose. Sarah would have done the same thing, he thought. She always knew when someone needed help. Driving home that night, Michael couldn't shake the image of the woman and her baby from his mind. He hoped the money would help them get through whatever difficult situation they were facing. Little did he know that this random act of kindness would lead to a discovery that would change his life forever. In his large, empty house, he found Emily studying in the kitchen. His 17-year-old daughter looked up from her books and immediately noticed something different about her father. "You seem lighter," she observed. "Did something good happen at work?" Michael smiled, realizing that for the first time in months, he felt truly alive. "I just helped someone today," he said simply. "It reminded me of your mother." Emily's eyes softened at the mention of Sarah. She always said that helping others was the best way to heal our own hearts. As Michael prepared for bed that night, he had no idea that tomorrow would bring an unexpected twist to this simple act of kindness. The young woman he helped would reappear in his life in a way he could never have imagined, at a place that held his deepest sorrows and most precious memories. That night, sleep eluded Michael. He tossed and turned in his king-size bed, his mind repeatedly drifting to the young mother and her baby. The emptiness of his massive bedroom seemed to mock him. A space, once filled with Sarah's warmth, now held nothing but memories. Around midnight, he got up and walked to his home office. Opening the bottom drawer of his desk, he pulled out an old photo album. There, captured in fading photographs, was Sarah in the hospital's cancer ward, always smiling despite her illness. She had insisted on continuing her volunteer work there even during her own treatments, saying that helping others gave her strength. You would have known exactly what to do today, he whispered to her image. You always did. The sound of soft footsteps made him look up. Emily stood in the doorway, wearing her mother's old college sweatshirt. Can't sleep either, she asked, settling into the chair across from him. Her eyes fell on the photo album. I miss her too, Dad. Michael smiled sadly. That woman today, something about her reminded me of the people your mom used to help at the hospital. Emily leaned forward, suddenly interested. Tell me about her. As Michael described the encounter, Emily's expression grew thoughtful. Mom would have done more than just give money, she said. She would have made sure they were really okay. Her words struck something in Michael. Sarah indeed would have done more. She would have found out their story, connected them with resources, made sure they had support. Maybe we should go back tomorrow, Emily suggested. See if she needs more help. Michael shook his head. We can't force help on people who haven't asked for it, sweetheart. But you're right. Your mother would have found a way to do more. Later that night, after Emily had gone back to bed, Michael found himself scrolling through old emails from Sarah. She had kept detailed records of the families she helped at the hospital, always finding ways to support them even after they left the cancer ward. One particular email caught his eye, dated just weeks before her death. Sarah had written about a young nursing student who had shown exceptional kindness to the patients. The student's name wasn't mentioned, but Sarah had written about how this young woman would sing to the children in the pediatric ward and spend extra time comforting elderly patients. As dawn approached, Michael finally felt sleep creeping in. Before heading to bed, he made a decision. Tomorrow morning, he would visit Sarah's grave as he did every day, but this time with a different perspective. Sarah had taught him that true wealth wasn't in their bank accounts but in the lives they touched. He dozed off briefly but woke early, his mind still active with thoughts of the previous evening. As he prepared for his day, Emily came down for breakfast, looking concerned. Dad, I was thinking, she said, pouring cereal into a bowl. What if that woman doesn't have anyone to help her? Like, what if she's all alone? Michael paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. You sound just like your mother. Is that a bad thing? No, sweetheart. It's a wonderful thing. As he drove to the cemetery that morning, Michael's thoughts were divided between Sarah and the mysterious woman with the baby. The early morning fog hung low over the graves, creating an ethereal atmosphere. He parked in his usual spot, grabbed the fresh flowers he brought, and began the familiar walk to Sarah's grave. But something was different today. Through the morning mist, he could make out a figure kneeling at a gravestone. As he got closer, his heart nearly stopped. There, at Sarah's grave, was the young woman from last night. She hadn't noticed him yet, too absorbed in whatever she was doing. Michael stood frozen, watching as she placed something by the headstone. Questions raced through his mind. How did she know Sarah? Why was she here? What connection could possibly exist between his late wife and this stranger he helped? The answer would soon change everything he thought he knew about his wife's final days and the true meaning of her legacy. Michael stood motionless among the maple trees, his breath caught in his throat. The morning fog swirled around his feet as he watched the young woman kneel before Sarah's grave. She was wearing the same worn jacket from the previous night, but her baby was wrapped more snugly now, protected from the morning chill. He could hear her speaking softly, her words carried away by the gentle breeze. The intimacy of the moment made him hesitate to move closer. This wasn't the desperate woman he'd met outside the grocery store. Her posture spoke of familiarity, of comfort, as if she were talking to an old friend. I found help yesterday. Her voice finally reached him as the wind shifted. Just like you said I would, Sarah. You were right, as always. Michael's heart skipped a beat. She knew his wife's name. Not just the name on the gravestone, but spoke it with the warmth of someone who had known Sarah personally. The baby stirred, making small fussy noises. The woman adjusted her hold, gently patting the infant's back. Sure, little one, we're just visiting Aunt Sarah. She always said this was the most peaceful place in the morning. Aunt Sarah? Michael's mind raced. Sarah had never mentioned having a close relationship with a young woman who called her aunt. But then again, there were many things about Sarah's hospital work that she kept private, respecting the confidentiality of the people she helped. As he watched, the woman reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She placed it carefully against the base of the headstone, weighing it down with a small stone. Then she took out half of the money Michael had given her the night before and placed it alongside the envelope. "I can't keep all of it," she whispered to the grave. "You taught me about dignity, about only taking what you truly need. The formula and diapers didn't cost this much. The rest, well, I think you wanted to help someone else." Tears pricked at Michael's eyes. This was exactly what Sarah would have said. Her voice seemed to echo in his memory. "When you receive kindness, multiply it." The baby began to cry in earnest now, and the woman stood up, brushing off her knees. "We have to go now, Sarah, but I'll be back, just like always. Thank you for still looking out for us, even now." Michael quickly stepped behind a large oak tree as she turned to leave. He watched her walk away, gently bouncing the baby and humming a soft tune, the same lullaby Sarah used to sing to Emily. Once she was gone, Michael approached his wife's grave. His hands trembled as he picked up the envelope. Should he read it? It felt like intruding on something private, yet he needed to understand this connection. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly smudged in places where tears had fallen. "Dear Sarah, your husband found me last night. Of all the people in this city, it was him. I didn't tell him who I was. How could I? But when he helped me, I saw you in his eyes. That same kindness you showed me during my darkest days in the hospital. Remember how you promised to help when my baby came? I was so scared when you passed away before she was born, but somehow you're still keeping your promise. Michael gave me enough for formula and diapers, just when I needed it most. I'm returning half because that's what you would have wanted. You always said, take what you need, share what you can. The baby's middle name is Sarah. I hope you don't mind. She'll grow up knowing about the angel who helped her mother survive. Love always, Emma." Michael sank to his knees, the letter clutched in his hands. Emma, the name stirred a distant memory. Sarah had mentioned her in those final weeks, talking about a young nurse in training who had become like family to her patients. As the morning sun finally broke through the fog, Michael realized this wasn't just a coincidence. Somehow, Sarah was still bringing people together, still helping those in need through the ripples of love she'd created in life. He carefully folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. There was more to this story, much more, and he was determined to understand it all. Back in his office, Michael couldn't focus on work. Emma's letter lay on his desk, and he'd read it at least a dozen times. His executive assistant, Patricia, who had worked with him for 15 years, noticed his distraction. "Michael, your 10 a.m. meeting is waiting," she reminded him gently. Then, seeing his troubled expression, she asked, "Is everything all right?" He looked up at Patricia, suddenly remembering something. "Pat, you worked closely with Sarah on her hospital volunteer work. Did you ever meet a young nurse named Emma?" Patricia's eyes widened with recognition. "Emma Carter? Of course. Sweet girl, had a rough time. Sarah took her under her wing during the final months of her treatment." She paused, her face softening. "Why do you ask?" Michael shared the events of the past 24 hours. As he spoke, Patricia sat down, her hand covering her mouth in surprise. "Sarah was determined to help Emma," Patricia explained. "She made me promise not to tell you because she knew you'd worry about her overexerting herself. Emma was pregnant and alone. Her boyfriend left when he found out about the baby, and her parents had passed away years ago." Michael leaned back in his chair, pieces falling into place. "Sarah knew she was dying, didn't she? That's why she made all those promises to help people." Patricia nodded, wiping away a tear. "She kept files on everyone she wanted to help. Wait." She hurried out to her desk and returned with a small USB drive. "Sarah gave me this before the end. She said to keep it safe until it was needed." With shaking hands, Michael plugged the drive into his computer. Inside was a folder labeled My Promise List. Among various documents was a file named Emma_Carter.doc. He opened it and began to read. "Emma Carter came to our hospital as a nursing student with dreams of helping others. Life hasn't been kind to her, but her spirit remains unbroken. She spends extra hours with patients, brings flowers from her tiny garden, and sings to the children. When I learned she was pregnant and alone, I knew I had to help. My time is running short, but my promise to her cannot die with me. Michael, if you're reading this, you've somehow found Emma. Help her finish nursing school. She'll make an amazing nurse, The kind who remembers that healing isn't just about medicine, but about kindness too. P.S. If you need proof of who she is, check the bottom drawer of my bedside table. There's a photo album she made for me. Michael sat in stunned silence. After Sarah's death, he hadn't been able to go through her personal things. Her bedside table remained untouched, like a time capsule of their life together. That evening, he finally found the courage to open that drawer. Inside was a handmade album covered in pressed flowers. The first page showed Sarah in her hospital bed, smiling despite her illness, with a younger Emma sitting beside her. They were both laughing at something off camera. More photos followed. Emma reading to Sarah during chemotherapy sessions, both women working on a puzzle in the hospital garden, Sarah helping Emma study for her nursing exams. The final page held a sonogram picture with a note. Baby's first photo, Aunt Sarah's future godchild. Michael's phone buzzed, a text from Emily. Dad, found something in Mom's old emails. Did you know she was helping a nursing student pay for school? There are copies of tuition receipts. He texted back, come home early. There's something I need to show you. As he waited for Emily, Michael studied the photos again. Sarah had known her time was limited, but instead of retreating, she reached out to help others. She created a plan to ensure her kindness lived on, even after she was gone. The half of the money Emma had returned still sat on his desk. Looking at it now, he understood. This wasn't just about helping someone in need. This was about fulfilling Sarah's final wishes, about connecting the fragments of good she'd left behind. He picked up his phone again and called Patricia. Find out which nursing school Emma was attending. It's time we helped her finish what Sarah started. As he hung up, Michael felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. His wife had left him more than just memories. She'd left him a mission. The next morning, Michael sat in his car outside Seattle Grace Hospital, where Sarah had spent her final months. The familiar building brought back both painful and precious memories, but today he was here with a purpose. He walked through the sliding doors and headed straight to the oncology ward. Many of the nurses recognized him, offering warm smiles and gentle greetings. At the nurse's station, he found Maria, the head nurse who had cared for Sarah. Mr. Henderson, she said warmly, it's been a while. Maria, I need to know about Emma Carter, he said directly. She was a nursing student here when Sarah was receiving treatment. Maria's face lit up with recognition, then fell slightly. Emma, yes, such a shame what happened. She was one of our most promising students. Over coffee in the staff room, Maria filled in the missing pieces of the story. Emma had been in her final year of nursing school, working part-time at the hospital when she met Sarah. Despite her own illness, Sarah had noticed how Emma would stay late after her shifts, helping patients and bringing them small comforts. Then Emma found out she was pregnant. Maria continued. Her boyfriend left, and she couldn't manage the clinical hours with morning sickness. Sarah. Maria's voice caught. Sarah paid her tuition for that semester, but after Sarah passed away, Emma had to drop out. She was just 3 months short of graduating. Michael listened intently, his heart heavy. Do you have her student records? Her contact information? Maria shook her head. She moved after leaving the program, but she hesitated, then reached for her phone. I have something you should see. She pulled up a video and handed him the phone. It showed Sarah sitting in her hospital bed, with Emma beside her. They were looking at a baby catalog together. This will be your little one's first blanket. Sarah's voice was weak but happy. And when you graduate, I'll be there cheering the loudest. I can't take all this help, Emma protested in the video. You can, and you will, Sarah insisted. Promise me you'll finish school, no matter what. Promise me you'll be the amazing nurse I know you can be. The video ended, and Michael handed the phone back, his vision blurred with tears. She's still here in Seattle, Maria said softly. I see her sometimes at the free clinic on 4th Street. She volunteers there when she can, helping new mothers. Michael stood up, his decision made. Thank you, Maria. You've helped more than you know. Before leaving the hospital, he made one more stop at the administrative office. Using his influence as a major donor, he obtained Emma's old student records. The file showed outstanding grades and glowing recommendations from her instructors. Back in his office, he called the Dean of Nursing at Seattle Grace. Dean Matthews, This is Michael Henderson. I want to discuss creating a special scholarship program, but first, I need to know if a student had to leave the program due to personal circumstances, what would it take for them to return and complete their degree? The dean's response was encouraging. With proper documentation and a brief refresher course, a student could resume their studies where they left off. Michael then called his lawyer to set up a foundation in Sarah's name. The Sarah Henderson Memorial Scholarship would cover nursing students facing personal hardships, with a special focus on single parents. As he worked through the details, Emily called. "Dad, I found more of Mom's emails. She had plans for Emma's baby shower, lists of things the baby would need. She even started a savings account." "I know, sweetheart," Michael interrupted gently. "I'm at the hospital now. I understand why Mom cared so much about helping Emma." There was a pause on the line. "Are we going to help her finish school?" "We are. But first, we need to do something else. Can you meet me at the free clinic on 4th Street tomorrow morning?" "The clinic? Why?" Michael smiled, looking at the photo of Sarah on his desk, "because that's where Emma volunteers. It's time we properly introduced ourselves and fulfilled your mother's last promise." As he hung up, Michael felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever. She had always seen the best in people, always found ways to help others grow. Now it was his turn to continue her legacy of kindness. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter in this unexpected story, one that would change not just Emma's life, but his and Emily's as well. The free clinic on 4th Street was busy when Michael and Emily arrived the next morning. They found Emma in the waiting room, wearing scrubs borrowed from the clinic, helping a young mother calm her crying baby. "See? Just hold them like this." Emma was demonstrating a gentle rocking motion. "My Sarah fusses the same way sometimes." Michael and Emily exchanged glances at hearing the baby's name. They waited until Emma finished helping the mother before approaching. "Emma?" Michael said softly. She turned, and her face went pale with recognition. The confident posture she'd shown moments ago disappeared, replaced by uncertainty. "Mr. Henderson, she stammered, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "About the money." "Please," Michael interrupted gently. "We need to talk. About Sarah." Emily stepped forward. "I'm Emily, Sarah's daughter. We found your letter at Mom's grave." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Emily. "You look just like her. She showed me so many pictures of you." A nurse poked her head into the waiting room. "Emma, your shift ended 20 minutes ago. Don't forget to pick up Sarah from the daycare." "Would you join us for coffee?" Michael asked. "There's a cafe across the street. We can watch Sarah while you change." 15 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of the cafe. Baby Sarah slept peacefully in Emily's arms while Emma nervously stirred her coffee. "I wanted to tell you that night," Emma said. "But how do you tell a stranger that their wife changed your life? That she was the mother figure you never had?" Michael pulled out Sarah's journal and placed it on the table. "She wrote about you, about her plans to help you finish nursing school." Emma's hands trembled as she touched the journal. "She believed in me when nobody else did. Even when she was so sick, she quizzed me on medical terms and procedures." She wiped away a tear. "The day she passed away, I promised her I'd finish school. But then reality hit. No money, a baby on the way." Emily, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Mom never broke her promises, and now we're here to help keep hers." Michael pulled out a folder containing the scholarship papers. "We've created the Sarah Henderson Memorial Scholarship. It will cover your remaining tuition, plus living expenses. You can return to your studies while keeping your baby close." Emma stared at the papers in disbelief. I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Emily said firmly, using the same tone Sarah had used in the video. "Mom chose you for a reason. She saw something special in you. The scholarship requires you to maintain your grades and complete your clinical hours," Michael explained. "But we've arranged for flexible scheduling, and there's a daycare center at the hospital." Baby Sarah stirred and opened her eyes, looking straight at Michael with the same trusting gaze he'd seen in countless patients that Sarah had helped. "Your daughter deserves to see her mother achieve her dreams," Michael said softly, "just like Sarah wanted." Emma looked at her daughter, then at the papers, and finally at Michael and Emily. "Sarah always said that angels come in many forms. that sometimes help arrives just when you think all hope is lost. She was the angel, Emily said, smiling down at baby Sarah. We're just trying to follow her example. As Emma signed the scholarship acceptance papers, Michael felt a weight lift from his heart. This was why Sarah had helped so many people, not just to change their lives, but to create a chain of kindness that would continue long after she was gone. Classes start next month, Michael said. Until then, we'd love to hear more about your time with Sarah. There are so many stories we never knew. As Emma began to share memories of Sarah's final months, stories of laughter in hospital rooms, of hope in dark moments, of promises made and kept, Michael watched his daughter bond with baby Sarah. His wife's legacy wasn't just in the helping, it was in the connection she created, the lives she brought together. Outside the cafe window, golden autumn leaves danced in the breeze, and for a moment, Michael could have sworn he felt Sarah's presence, smiling down on this unlikely family she had brought together through her final act of love. 3 months later, the halls of Seattle Grace Hospital buzzed with a different kind of energy. Emma, now back in her student nurse uniform, walked confidently through the oncology ward where her journey with Sarah had begun. Baby Sarah spent her days in the hospital's daycare center, just 2 floors down. Michael had done more than just create a scholarship. He'd renovated an unused section of the hospital into a state-of-the-art daycare facility, naming it Sarah's Corner. It served not just Emma's baby, but also the children of other nursing students and hospital staff. One morning, as Emma prepared for her clinical rounds, she found an old patient file that made her pause. It was Sarah's. Inside, she discovered a handwritten note she'd never seen before. To whoever finds this, my name is Sarah Henderson, and I believe in miracles. Not the kind that cure diseases, but the kind that happen when people help each other. Take care of my family when I'm gone. They'll need reminding that love doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to show itself. Emma tucked the note into her pocket, her eyes misting over. Later that day, during her lunch break, she sat with Emily in the hospital cafeteria. The teenage girl had started volunteering at Sarah's Corner after school, following in her mother's footsteps. Dad's different now, Emily said, sharing her sandwich with Emma. It's like he's found a purpose again. The foundation is helping so many people. Indeed, the Sarah Henderson Memorial Foundation had grown beyond just one scholarship. Michael had expanded it to support single parents pursuing medical careers across the state. Every recipient had a story that somehow connected back to Sarah's kindness. Your mom knew exactly what she was doing, Emma replied, watching through the window as Michael gave a tour of Sarah's Corner to potential donors. She was building a family, piece by piece, even when she knew she wouldn't be here to see it. In the daycare below, baby Sarah was learning to crawl. The staff had created a special wall of photos, showing all the children who spent their days there. At the center was a beautiful portrait of Sarah Henderson, her warm smile watching over them all. Michael's company had changed too. He'd implemented family-friendly policies, inspired by Emma's story. Flexible hours, on-site childcare, and educational support became standard benefits. His board members were skeptical at first, but the results spoke for themselves. Employee loyalty soared, and productivity increased. One evening, as Emma finished her shift, she found Michael in Sarah's Corner, reading a story to baby Sarah and 2 other children. You know, he said, looking up from the book, Sarah always wanted to create a place like this. She believed hospitals should heal more than just bodies. Emma sat down beside them, her nursing textbook in her lap. I'm taking my final exams next month, she said. I never thought I'd get here. Sarah knew you would, Michael replied. She saw strength in people before they saw it in themselves. The foundation was planning a special graduation ceremony for its first class of scholars. Emily had suggested holding it in the hospital garden where Sarah used to spend her good days. There would be 5 graduates, each with their own story of how Sarah's legacy had changed their lives. As Emma studied late into the night, baby Sarah sleeping peacefully beside her in their new apartment, another quiet arrangement by Michael, she often thought about that day at the grocery store, how close she'd come to giving up, and how one act of kindness had opened the door to so much more. Michael, too, found himself reflecting on how much had changed. The emptiness in his home had been filled with purpose, his daughter had found new joy in helping others, and his wife's final wishes had bloomed into something beautiful and lasting. One day, he overheard Emma telling another student about Sarah. She taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who help you become who you're meant to be. The words echoed in his heart, reminding him of Sarah's favorite saying, "When you help someone else heal, you heal a little bit too." As autumn turned to winter, Sarah's corner continued to grow, filled with the laughter of children and the hope of new beginnings. It was more than just a daycare center or a scholarship program. It was the living proof that love, like Sarah had known all along, finds ways to multiply long after we're gone. 1 year after that fateful evening at the grocery store, the hospital garden was decorated with flowers and ribbons. It was graduation day for the first class of Sarah Henderson Memorial Scholars, and Emma was their valedictorian. The garden, where Sarah had once found peace during her treatments, now held rows of chairs filled with families, hospital staff, and supporters. Baby Sarah, now a toddling 1-year-old, wore a tiny nurse's cap as she played near the podium with Emily watching over her. Michael stood at the back, watching the scene unfold. 5 graduates in their nursing caps and gowns, each carrying a story of transformation. Emma stepped up to the podium, her hands steady as she adjusted the microphone. "A year ago, I was lost," she began. "I had a baby, no home, and a dream that seemed impossible. Then I met a kind stranger who turned out to be more than just a random act of kindness. He was the answer to a promise made by an extraordinary woman." She paused, looking at Michael and Emily. Sarah Henderson saw the best in people. She knew that sometimes all we need is someone to believe in us. Today, as we graduate, we're not just becoming nurses, we're becoming links in a chain of compassion that she started. The ceremony continued with each graduate receiving their pin. When it was Emma's turn, Michael and Emily together pinned the nurse's badge on her uniform. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. After the ceremony, they gathered at Sarah's grave. It had become a tradition now. Every important moment was shared with her. The headstone was surrounded by fresh flowers, and pinned to each graduate's bouquet was a note that read, "Sarah believed in you, and so do we." "I got the job at the pediatric ward," Emma told the headstone, baby Sarah balanced on her hip. "Just like you said I would." Michael stepped forward, placing his own flowers. "The foundation is expanding," he said softly. 10 new scholarships next year. The board just approved it." Emily, now heading to college herself, had chosen to study hospital administration. "Mom's Corner is becoming a model for other hospitals," she added proudly. 3 more cities want to build their own versions." As they stood there, a young mother approached them hesitantly. She was one of the new scholarship recipients, selected for the coming year. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. I wanted to thank you all. When I read Sarah's story about how she helped people even when she was sick, it changed something in me." Michael smiled, remembering Sarah's words. Kindness creates ripples that turn into waves. The foundation had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. Sarah's Corner now had a waiting list, and hospitals across the country were studying their model. But more than the programs or buildings, it was the lives changed that mattered most. That evening, they had a small celebration at Michael's house, no longer the empty mansion it had been a year ago, but a warm home filled with photographs old and new. Pictures of Sarah hung alongside photos of baby Sarah's first steps, Emma's study sessions with Emily, and the graduation ceremony. As they sat in the garden, watching baby Sarah chase fireflies with Emily, Emma turned to Michael. "Do you think this is what she saw?" she asked. "When she made all those plans, do you think she knew we'd become a family?" Michael smiled, remembering the note they'd found in her patient file. Sarah always saw the bigger picture. She knew that love doesn't end, it transforms. The foundation's work would continue, touching more lives each year. But here, in this moment, they were simply a family brought together by one woman's foresight and love. Baby Sarah toddled over to them, holding a dandelion she'd picked. She offered it to Michael with a smile that was pure sunshine, the same kind of smile Sarah had given to everyone she met. "You know," Emily said, joining them, "Mom used to say that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have really big hearts and the courage to use them." As the evening stars appeared, they sat together, this unlikely family created by a chance encounter and a promise kept. The story that began with a desperate mother and a kind stranger had become something much more, a testament to the power of love that reaches beyond grief, beyond time, and beyond the boundaries of traditional family. Sarah's legacy lived on, not just in the foundation or the programs, but in the hearts she had brought together, in the lives she had changed, and in the love that continued to grow, just as she had planned all along. The end.